So, quality journalism. We're doing. We started out talking about weighty issues like democracy. We've talked about the decline and fall of copy editing, and how John Oliver conducts himself as a newsman. And now we're going to reach the portion of the event that is going to have to do with how people in the field, and 3 out of 4 of the people on this panel are New Jerseyans, so that's pretty exciting too. So let's start first. How are people doing quality journalism in the field today? We're starting with Phil Alongi, executive producer for NJTV News, and he's gonna. And I'm really sad that he used to be right across the hall from me and hasn't been for a few months. So I was really glad to see him today and be able to give him a hug. He's going to be talking about issues versus incidents: the search for smart local news.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Phil Alongi, and I'm going to try to figure out how to use a PC here.
You have a presentation that we already pulled up, right?
Yeah. It's on a thumb drive somewhere. It was here. Here it is. Okay.
There you go.
Cool. No, it's okay. It's okay.
Get that 4 seconds back.
Right, exactly. So NJTV is the public television affiliate for New Jersey. We are the only statewide broadcaster, the only broadcaster that is broadcasting in all 21 counties of the state. Unique in that usually as media markets go, it's the New York market, the Philly market, and what we try to do is bridge that gap and be the voice for New Jersey that often gets ignored by the New York and Philly markets. And as somebody that's grown up in New Jersey and has lived here most of his life, that's something that I take very personally. And we have a little bit of a chip on our shoulder at NJTV. We want to make sure that the stories that the rest of the outlets are ignoring are amplified. So what do? We have a half-hour live news broadcast at 6:00 p.m. That also airs simultaneously on Channel 13, which is our parent company. That WNET holds the license for NJTV as well. I like to say that we are issue-oriented instead of incident-oriented. So a lot of what you see on local news is, if it bleeds, it leads, and you'll see a fire and a shooting and things that affect you if you live on that block or you have family or friends that live on that block. But otherwise, if we asked you a week from now, where was that shooting? Give me some details. You'd say, I don't know, because a chalk line is a chalk line. A caution tape is a caution tape. What are you learning from your news content? And if you're not learning something from it, then we're not interested in putting it on in TV. So what we do is we'll be interested in a shooting in Newark, but instead of isolating it as an incident, we'll look at the overarching, we'll look at violent crime statistics and violent crime trends within the city, as opposed to nonviolent crime trends. And we'll look at what factors are going into this type of crime and how much of this corresponds to Mayor Booker having to cut the police force when he came in because of budgetary reasons and that kind of thing. We're afforded opportunities, and we have different challenges as being a PBS station. I started my career at NBC, where the news division has a $400 million budget, and now I'm working with a $4 million budget. It was a big change, but there are a lot of extra benefits to what we do. First of all, we don't have a corporate structure breathing down our neck. We don't have the constant push and drive for ratings, which I think all commercial entities to some extent have. We kind of self-impose that on ourselves because we're not doing this for practice, and we want to make sure that our word is getting out. But ratings are not going to affect our foundation giving and institutional giving. As long as folks like you guys keep buying tote bags at $60 a pop, we'll still be here to give the stories. Another opportunity it affords us is the length of time we have to go into a piece. So an average package on local news will be, anywhere between 45 seconds and a minute and 10, a minute and a half. It's a huge story. Most of our pieces run about 2.5 minutes, up to 3 minutes in length, up to 4 minutes if it's worth it. Nobody's watching the clock. We don't have a commercial break. We fill that entire half hour with news, and then we redo it again the next day. It brings up some important collaborating issues. But we basically have to, we rely on like-minded institutions and organizations to help for funding. So, for instance, Mr. Daggett and the Dodge Foundation. People and institutions that are funding the mission, and we look also at opportunities for collaboration. And a lot of our good partners are here. Kevin Whitmer, who you'll hear from later. We have a great relationship with Advanced Media and NJ.com and the Star Ledger, and we've provided a platform for some of their best video journalists. We often will play work from Andre Malik and A.D. Beasley, and we love doing it. We have a great relationship with NJ News Commons, and if you're not familiar with what Debbie is doing over there, you should be as journalists or as aspiring journalists, because it's a fantastic resource, and it's bringing together resources for journalists that are up and coming, and then through all levels, we've benefited from the relationship as well, to give some of the tools. We talked a little bit this morning about citizen journalists, but there's a learning curve, and a lot of the same resources that bigger organizations have. The legal background, the graphic needs, the how to fill out an Oprah request, that kind of stuff you can learn through NJ News Commons. So we're appreciative of what you guys are doing there. Which leads me to one example of a way that we are able to collaborate, and I want to show you here. So you're going to hear from Tyson, and I'm kind of stepping on his presentation a little bit now. But one of the things we did, so we don't have, excuse me one second. I'm getting a spinning circle, so we'll let that fill out in a second. So as we're not a commercial entity, we don't have competitors. I mean, our mission, the overarching mission of public television is to educate and to inspire and to enrich. And how we feel, and our point is that as long as we're doing those things, all like-minded missions are part of our mission. So something we saw that the Record did, this In Heroine's Grip piece, which is a really great documentary that Tyson will get into a little more detail than I will, was a fantastic piece of video journalism that we were able to give a platform and branch out, and we spent 7 minutes talking about heroin epidemic in the state. And there's not a lot of local news outlets, probably aren't any local news outlets that would allow you to take 7 minutes of airtime to talk about something like this. So as soon as his wheel stops spinning, say it, spinning. Hey, it's done. All right, good. We shamed it. And now it's... Okay, so anyway, I should say who this is, by the way. Mary Alice Williams is a familiar face to a lot of you, I'm sure. She's was a pioneer in this industry. She was an executive at a time where women were not executives in media. She was a vice president at CNN and one of its founding members that put this together. She's a fantastic person, fantastic colleague, has a bug for teaching, and is a tenured professor at SUNY Purchase, which is one of the things that attracted me to her. It's great for our newsroom and our young staff that's hungry for knowledge. Mary Alice goes around the room and asks, "What are you doing? What are you working on? Can I see? How about try this?" There's no ego. She's a gem, and I'm saying that sincerely, even though she's not here to hear it. But somebody email her and tell her that I said I love her. So anyway, so this was a case of how we credited the Record with their report. We presented it on our air for all of our viewers, and then even invited Tyson and one of his colleagues on set to wrap and talk about a little bit more about the process. It's just a couple clips.
Nearly 50 people who died in Bergen County last year died of heroin overdoses. Law enforcement say heroin has reached epidemic proportions in New Jersey. The newspaper, the Bergen Record, deployed reporters and photojournalists to Patterson, where the heroin trade is ruining lives far beyond its urban borders. Over 6 months, the reporting has revealed a unique and painful subculture in heroin's grip. The images, we warn you, are quite graphic.
I've never seen anything like this. Every year, the deaths get worse, the overdoses get worse, the ages get younger.
It's like a freaking labyrinth, maze. Just round and round and round you go until you either die, go to jail, or you're institutionalized in a rehab or something. That's pretty much it.
I'm a heroin addict. I've been a heroin addict for about 15 years. I just relapsed 3 weeks ago. I had 9 months clean, but the drugs kept calling me the whole time.
How did Patterson become a magnet for the heroin trade? A perfect economic and demographic storm. Industry left, people lost jobs, abandoned homes, a quarter of the police force was cut, and into the vacuum of 1,200 abandoned buildings moved looters and dealers and people shooting up or finding shelter. The extraordinary reporting for the series In Heroin's Grip was done by photojournalists Tyson, Trish, and Tom Franklin, photographer and videographer from the Bergen Record. Thanks for being with us. What personal story surprised you the most?
I think
So I'll pause so I don't give away Tyson's whole thing here. But just to give you a little taste of the format, and again, we're not competing against the Record. We're not competing against NJ.com. We are not competing against anyone that's doing these stories that are important to our audience. And there are no such thing as exclusive platforms anymore. We are not the TV entity. I mean, it's NJTV is in there, but there's no such thing as a separate television station and a separate website and a separate newspaper. And I think this was as good an example I can think of to show that. I mean, this was work that a newspaper was doing through a medium of visuals and video that a broadcaster was putting on the air. So we welcome this. If anyone has a project like this that fits into what we're doing, come see me now or reach out to me this week. So that's basically what I want to focus on today was the aspect of collaboration. We have these packs. Anybody familiar with live view packs? If you want to raise your hand. Live view? Okay, so live views are it's a fairly new technology. It's basically a backpack. I should have brought one in with me. That has cellular air cards in it, and there's about 5 of them in the model that we have. So it takes bandwidth from Verizon and T-Mobile and Sprint and the bigger providers. Has an SDI out on the pack. You can plug your camera into that pack and go live from anywhere in the world wirelessly. The backpack costs $30,000, but it's a fraction of what it would cost to buy a satellite truck and equip the whole thing and pay for airtime at $200 an hour and make sure that the dish is tilted the right way and get the truck over. So we rented a number of them for election night 2012. We had them in our possession 2 weeks beforehand so we could play with them and see how they work. And what happened 2 weeks before election night? Hurricane Sandy. And we had these packs, and we said, what the hell, let's take them out and see what they can do. And we sent them out with our reporters, and we were able to do live shots on the beach with these packs in full HD. At the time, it was about a 4-second latency, and the technology has gotten better with the new software updates, but it used to sound like you were talking to someone in Afghanistan, even if they were 3 blocks away from you in Jersey City. It enabled somebody like us at NJTV, a public television station, to have some of the same toys that the big dogs like Sean have at CBS, where we can try to compete in at least in reach and see where we can get geographically. So there was a little article that I think it was Kate Zernike in the New York Times wrote about the little station that could in our Sandy coverage as we were trying to, first of all, bail out our own basements, deal with our partners at home that had no power, also put this news on for who the hell knew who was watching it, because nobody had any power to watch a thing, but we put it on live every night. And there was an article put up in the New York Times about the usage of these live view packs, and one of a longtime donor of WNET called and said, I'll buy 3 packs if you can get matching money to buy 3 more, and we ended up with a slew of live view packs that we've used. It's interesting now to see things like Periscope and Meerkat that are coming up that have kind of the same capabilities, and it's also a little scary because I don't think we know all the pitfalls yet, and I think there's a big difference, obviously, between what's news and what's source material, and video can lie. It's not that anybody could be a citizen journalist, depending on the definition, but that doesn't mean everybody's going to be a good journalist. And if you have, an iPhone that's showing a mob of people, but you don't have the ethical guidelines and the journalistic skills to say, take a step back 15 yards and let's see what this looks like from a bigger view, and maybe that mob of people is only 6 people, but you don't know that because you're just taking this as one source. You can see the challenges that we all have now as we're starting to get in video from anyone. And, there's video going on right now with me. So I think that's where I'm going to leave it, and thank you for your time, and look forward to some questions afterwards. Nice. Can I sing for 30 seconds?
You can. That would be great. So next up, he got a little bit of a preview there, is Tyson Trish, photojournalist, award-winning photojournalist for the Bergen Record. And not only is he going to tell you about his adventures on the street, in the streets of Patterson, but it says in his bio that he's been to Iraq, so he's been in dangerous places. And I think it's really interesting to bring photography into this discussion 2 years after the Chicago Sun-Times fired all its professional photographers. So it's really a pleasure to have you here and talking about what you did.
Thanks for having me here. As you can tell, I was wearing the same sweater on TV. Yeah. My name is Tyson Trish. I'm a photojournalist at The Record. I'm here to talk about a special project we recently published called In Heroin's Grip, and show you some of the photographs and excerpts from the story. The story looks at the effects of heroin on Patterson and the communities that surround it. The project, which was published over 3 days in print and as a special web presentation, was the work of myself, reporter Rebecca O'Brien, multimedia journalist Tom Franklin, several different editors, the graphics and web teams, and was reviewed by our legal department. The story began with a series of ride-alongs with the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office during their heroin task force last May. The task force was made up of police officers from several departments across North Jersey, and their mission was to disrupt the heroin epidemic on the street. At times during the ride-along, it seemed as if heroin deals were taking place on every street corner as we navigated from bust to bust. Heroin does not discriminate. The buyers were from all walks of life and all over New Jersey, including this young man from Wayne. At the same time, officers pulled him over in this grocery center parking lot on Route 4. Another team was chasing the dealer, who ended up being a 16-year-old from Patterson, and his girlfriend. It's a hurricane, Lieutenant Borzada said. He estimates that 300 people from surrounding towns travel to Patterson for heroin every day. On some of the streets, over half the homes are abandoned. Drug users and homeless addicts use these properties to do drugs. Inside, they have been stripped to bare bones, trash, needles, litter, all over the floors. Tires and debris dumped in the yards. You can imagine living next door to this. Addicts can be seen passed out on school steps and carrying metal to scrap yards to raise money for their next score from a street corner drug market. This is an open-air market. Welcome to Death Ave. This one piece of graffiti on Godwin Ave stood out to me. Godwin is one of the most dangerous streets in Patterson. Since January 2012, there have been at least a dozen non-fatal shootings on the street, which is only a half-mile long. From the window of Jesse and Duke Barbershop on Godwin Ave, Jesse Philpott, it's also the building where the spray painting graffiti was. Jesse Philpott, a 92-year-old barber, has seen gunfights, drug deals, and robberies in broad daylight. And he still gives haircuts. Prostitution is an open-air practice, much the same as the sale and use of drugs. We met Christina Misko, a prostitute walking down Van Houten Ave with a black eye and a swollen cheekbone. She had just been released from the hospital after being assaulted. Why am I here? Misko said. You know why I'm here. She needed to buy drugs. She needed drugs and money. When we published the report, we had people comment that they thought she had died since we had talked to her last, but we later found out she is currently in drug court. William Henderson, a 61-year-old homeless man known locally as Needle Guy. You can find him sitting in his wheelchair behind a gas station just a few steps down from the Well of Hope drop-in center. Henderson buys syringes for $1 a piece, then he sells them to other users for a small profit. 50 years ago, this was a racist city, he said, but people still cared about people. People don't care about nothing no more. These are some of the needles that he had when we met him. Patterson, the state's third most populous city, has eroded for decades. It finds itself with 1,200 abandoned properties. This is Charles Florio. He's a developer who's buying up some of these properties. If you look at some of my properties on Governor Street, you would say straight up, you are a slumlord. He meant this figuratively, of course. Some of his houses appear to be in disrepair, but they're mostly the result of break-ins from people trying to steal valuable materials, like the copper wiring. They rip it right out of the walls, plumbing. While we were with him, he got a call that one of his apartments was just broken into. Looters attempting to rip the copper piping right off the baseboards ended up flooding the entire unit. They didn't even get the copper. Florio is taken to securing his properties that are under construction with metal grating on every opening and on every level. It's not enough just to do the first level. He puts these grates on the second, third, basement levels to try and keep people out. As we were here, people walking down the street commented that they were looking forward to possibly renting this place once it was refurbished. This is Mike Ward. You saw a little bit about him in the video. He's a homeless heroin addict. I've learned so much from these streets. Mike Ward said, I had 9 months clean, but the drugs kept calling me. Chasing the drug and being a heroin addict on the streets of Patterson, it's a full-time job. Mike Ward uses his salesmanship skills to raise $11 for 3 bags of heroin to start off his day. Along the way, he drinks from a half-empty soda bottle found in the trash, and he helps post office patrons carry in their packages. Addicts walk the streets nonstop. If they had a Fitbit, they'd reach their 10,000 steps by lunchtime, if they were even able to get lunch. Here, Mike walks through the Crack. It's a narrow passageway between Hinchcliffe Brewery and a train trestle that provides addicts a secluded place to shoot up just steps from their suppliers. Stuck in his addiction, Mike wanted to share his story with our readers. He wanted parents to see where heroin addicts end up. We had a lot of people like this who really were thoughtful about what they wanted to tell us and wanted to share their story with us. There were also some that didn't, but a lot of the addicts felt sharing their story might do some good. In North Jersey, heroin overdoses are on the rise. This is Timothy Lenartz. Weaved into our project was the story of Timothy, a 29-year-old heroin addict from Waldwick. On August 30th, Timothy, the 29-year-old heroin addict from Waldwick, was found beaten to death behind the abandoned Hinchcliffe Brewery on Governor Street. This is the brewery. He first tried heroin at a party sometime after graduating high school, his parents said. He got addicted to heroin, and that was his downfall. He couldn't shake it. In February 2013, Lenartz was arrested in Waldwick after detectives in Patterson saw him buying heroin. Soon afterward, Lenartz packed his things into his Jeep and moved into the abandoned Hinchcliffe Brewery. On August 29th, Patterson police got a phone call from a payphone just a few blocks from the brewery reporting a body on the property. It was Timothy Lenartz. This is the spot where he was found dead. You can still see police tape months later in the background. This is Brandy, one of the people that he lived with in the brewery, who still lived there at the time we met her. That afternoon, Patterson police stopped Carl Jones and Christopher Doubt. They were also companions at the brewery as they drove Lenartz's Jeep. The passenger window was smashed and a screwdriver had been used to start the car. Just this past December, 15 months after Timothy's death, Jones and Doubt were indicted in the slaying. They are currently in Passaic County Jail. It's nearly impossible to pass through the 4th Ward of Patterson without seeing a memorial or meeting a resident who can speak about the death of a nephew, brother, or son. One day this fall, we met Mazir Cannon, 14, standing vigil for his brother, Ramir Lockhart, who was shot and killed here on October 5th. Family and friends will maintain vigils for days, weeks, months, and even years like this. Here, Carrie-Ann Williams stands in front of a memorial painting for her son, Aaron, 25, who died after he was shot in 2011. She stops by the memorial. She often stops by the memorial. But it was the fatal shooting of a young girl that galvanized Patterson. On July 5th, this past summer, 12-year-old Genesis Rincon was riding her scooter at dusk down Rosa Parks Boulevard when she was shot in the head. Reaction in the city to Genesis' death was forceful. Her parents joined rallies that were held at City Hall. Hundreds joined a church group's march through the 4th Ward. Justice for Genesis became a call to action. Here, her father touches the spot where she was shot. You can still see the evidence markings painted on the street, which those are all over Patterson. If you walk through the town, you'll see that. Just the alphabet of letters everywhere people have been shot. But here you can see H and G. The Passaic County prosecutor said, "We work to the best of our ability with what we have. The reality is that we need more bodies to do this work." While authorities point the recent drop in crime as a heartening sign, violent crime dropped 23% in 2014. Patterson overall has seen deepening violence and an acceleration of the heroin trade over the past 4 years as suburban addicts have increasingly poured into the streets. As the drug trade increased, a $77 million budget hole forced the city to lay off 1/4 of its 500-member police force. During a ride-along with the Patterson Narcotics Unit, it was only an hour or so before they had filled their backs of their cars with buyers and sellers. The buyers seemed to come to them as they patrolled the streets with a convoy of unmarked cars. Dealers who knew a little bit better tried to speed away at first glance. This young man forgot to put his car in gear as he was revving his engine to speed away. Back at the station, the dealers and the sellers are all mixed together and processed. The heroin and the money on the same table as it's logged into evidence. Last year, there were 23 homicides, five more than in 2013, and 156 non-fatal shootings reported in the city. This is police officers looking for evidence at a shooting. Patterson is at a crisis point, one that reverberates in the towns and that surround the city. There is no end to this story. My goal is to continue to document the heroin epidemic. Thank you for letting me share this work today. If you want to see more of it, you can go to our website, northjersey.com/heroin report. There are a lot of great videos there. The whole story is there. A lot of great comments from the community. So if you haven't checked it out, please do.
So next up, we have Johanna Vehkoo, who is the founder of LongPlay and not a Jersey journalist, but a Finnish journalist. She's. I actually printed out your long paper on quality last night. Read some of it. It was very good. So you've been thinking about this issue. Tell us about LongPlay and about your thoughts about quality journalism. Thank you.
If you want to pull up our website, that can be just there, even though I don't have that. You can just put it here.
Yeah.
Right. I think anything that comes after that is going to be, very different. For one academic year and for a journalist, on a sabbatical, and I did kind of, I regretted having chosen that topic many times during that year. But in the end, it was good for me to tackle all those issues that I wrote about in that paper, which kind of ballooned and became this huge sort of monster of a thing, talking about everything and anything. It wasn't really that focused. But later on, it led me to actually write a book, stay at Oxford for a second year as a visiting fellow, and write a book in Finnish about the future of journalism, dealing with those same topics, and it has a chapter on quality. And after that, it led to the fact that I kind of became like a quality of journalism, future of journalism pundit in Finland, and went around the country in newsrooms and universities to talk about these issues. And eventually, it led to me thinking that, well, I shouldn't only be talking about these issues, I should actually do something. And that became LongPlay, which is the website you can see just here. I'll get to specifics about that a bit later on in my short talk. So why was I interested in trying to find definitions for quality of journalism? That was because my background is in newspapers. At the time when I went to Oxford, I was working in the second biggest daily in Finland at the culture department, and my beat was literature. And I became increasingly frustrated with the work I could do in the newspaper because I felt like I could not do it up to my own standards anymore. There was much less freedom, and well, of course, all the pressures that have been put upon newspapers for the past few years. So I went to Oxford to try and find out how I could actually explain to people what I mean about I want to do more quality journalism. What does that actually mean? So what I started with was I read all the possible academic research I could possibly find in Oxford University about quality journalism and how to define it, how to measure it. I read a lot Stephen Lacey, this room has, there are plenty of people here in this room that can explain these things much better than I could, so I'm not going to go there. You can ask Stephen Lacey. But turns out that there are not a whole lot of people in the world who can, answer with a one-sentence, all-encompassing answer about what quality journalism is. And actually, a friend and colleague of mine, a year later at Oxford, did a survey. He interviewed a lot of journalists, both in the UK and in Finland, and asked them and editors, and asked them what they thought quality was. And the only thing they could all agree on was that it should be accurate. It should be based on facts. And of course, we all know that certainly that's not enough to define quality journalism. So for me, what's truly important is the thing that's been said here today, that, quality journalism is indeed the kind of journalism that democracy just simply cannot do without. And that can just very easily be lost. And therefore, I think that this sort of ongoing discussion about what quality really is and what it means to us journalists and what it means to our audience is very necessary, and it's very needed. Because journalists actually need to argue that for their audiences much more than we used to. And if we don't argue for it, then who will? The role that journalism plays in a democracy may be crystal clear to most journalists, but it certainly is not to our audiences. Which takes me to the story of my startup LongPlay. What we do is long-form investigative journalism, long essays, reportage, and we publish one really, really long piece a month. It's almost like a short book. So 12 pieces a year. And initially we sold them as single stories, and we call them singles. We were founded by, us founders are 8 freelance journalists. And we worked on this for about a year before we launched it. And for launching, we actually spent $600. And that's it. But of course, we couldn't count the time, how much time we spent, launching it. And there was also a lot of goodwill from other people, like designers who helped us, photographers who helped us for free, because those people also, like us, believed in our mission. And our reasoning was that we were really sure that there should be enough people in a country like Finland who would want long, in-depth, well-written and carefully edited pieces online as well as they would do on paper. It's not like the same people who read quality journalism on paper would turn into idiots when they turn online, which is something that many people seem to believe. At the time of planning this, we looked into the US a lot. The Atavist had just launched, and Byliner, and we kind of took the single format from them. We had 2 different motivations to do this. Firstly, to show that high-quality journalism can be done online, and there is a demand for it. Secondly, we wanted to generate more discussion in the Finnish media about the crisis in journalism, which didn't really happen that much back in 2011, 2012. The Finnish news organizations were still pretty much profitable. They were laying off people already, but they were doing quite well, nevertheless. So when we launched, there was a lot of hype about us. And there was a lot of enthusiasm from the audience side. They were really happy that we launched. But there was also a lot of skepticism from journalists who could not believe that anyone would want to pay money for a single story. We had a lot of challenges as well. First of all, ebooks are still a tiny, tiny market in Finland. They're about less than 1% of all book sales, so it's tiny. We had absolutely no money for marketing. We had no money to build our own platform. Therefore, we needed Apple and other ebook stores to distribute our stuff, which also meant that they would get the data from our customers, and we couldn't get that, so we didn't have any metrics about how it was received. And also, we had zero chance of funding from anywhere. So that's why the $600 for launching. In Finland, the crisis of journalism wasn't really that far yet, so that there were absolutely no foundations who would give us money. They just wouldn't see journalism as a field that needed foundation funding. And of course, the venture capitalists were really not interested in funding something that was completely based on quality content. So, what's happened in the 2 and a bit years since our launch? We have won a news innovation contest, which gave us 250,000 euros. And with that money, we have developed our own publishing platform, which is what you see here. That's our latest single, and all the other singles are up there on the header. And that has saved a lot of things. Now we can also sell annual subscriptions instead of only just single stories, which means that our readers are much more loyal to us. They come back for every story. We now have about 2,000 subscribers, which in our small country is really, I think, is quite a lot. Of course, we're aiming for more. The launch of LongPlay is the reason why thousands of Finnish people have actually bought their first ever ebook, and why also thousands of Finnish people have paid for digital journalism for the first time in their life. So I think it's good for the industry as a whole. Because we now have a bit of money, we've been able to hire a more professional CEO who is not a journalist, because we used to be a bunch of hippies who didn't know anything about business. And we can also pay ourselves for work. We have a very strong social media following. For instance, we have about 10,000 likes on Facebook, which is a lot in Finland. And we have plans for world domination. We'll start from Europe. The idea is that, because we already have this platform and it works pretty well for us, if we can develop it further, I'm pretty sure we can find other journalist collectives in other countries who would be willing to do this sort of thing, but like us, would not have the money to start it up and build it from scratch. So we're thinking of the possibility of franchising LongPlay as a publishing model. So later on in Finland, what's happened is there is a boom in long form. Now everybody wants to do it online, where before, nobody believed in it. And every journalism conference there is, we're always cited as an example of an innovation. So we've come pretty far from the days of $600 for launch. I think I'll end it here, and you can ask me questions.
Oh, good. Okay. All right.
I'm happy to present Kevin Whitmer, who, when I met him, was editor-in-chief. First met him was, I believe, editor-in-chief of the Star-Ledger, and is now vice president of content for New Jersey Advanced Media. And he's going to be talking about why enterprise matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. I promised 15 minutes, right? Yeah. We're going to do it. I'm going to set my clock. See if we can get everybody in a little bit of a post-lunch mood here. Maybe some brownies for everybody. So this is a pretty great way, says the word guy, to wrap up a week. It's a pleasure for me to be here. As I've told some of you today, I actually began my journalism career about 29 years ago here at Rutgers because I was a really bad econ major. And I hope today I'm able to deliver a little bit different perspective on this. And we are going to sprint through 3 slides, I promise. Not a lot. But I hope the perspective I give you is a little bit different because each and every one of those 29 years has been spent doing daily journalism. The first 28 in newspapers, sports departments, business departments, news, pretty much every job. And then the last year with this new thing called NJ Advanced Media, which has allowed us to stretch out and really understand the transformation. And I've learned more, without doubt, in the past year about what's happening in our business than I have, without question, in the preceding 28 years. And I like to tell people I'm aging in editor years. But to get us back to enterprise today, I want to talk, just get my notes organized here, a little bit about the place of enterprise where we are today and some of the misconceptions. Tyson, and by the way, I love the sweater, was up here and showed us the highest level enterprise an organization can produce. That's an investigation. That was a team of reporters and photographers spending months. Most good enterprise does not have to go that deep. And I think that's something that people often fail to realize or forget. Great enterprise begins and ends on beats, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. One other thing before we launch on the slides, I want to make sure that the students and the early career journalists here take one thing away from this. The past 8 to 10 years have been crazy, but I firmly believe there has never been a better time to enter this field. The opportunities for journalists to build their own brands, to use tools, to tell stories, and to reach and engage directly with audience, right? It's no longer up to, an editor to decide whether that story is any good. We know in real time whether people are receiving content and what they think about it, whether they're sharing it and whether they're distributing it for it. The opportunities now are immense. Enjoy them. All right. No more sermons. Few basics. Enterprise. Let's start with the definition. Now, at some point before lunch, I think we had about 80 people here. May not be as many now. But if we asked for a definition earlier, I think we would get a good variety of answers. Most of those answers would probably be too complicated. And again, bringing it back to some of the stuff we've seen today and the long-form stuff, enterprise does not have to be this complicated. For the purposes of a 15-minute discussion and 2 pages of bullets, again, 2 pages, not easy to boil this down, I really think we should start with a real simple definition of enterprise. For these purposes, not breaking news, not event coverage, and not something put in front of you. Jerry, I think you said it earlier, it's something that tears away the curtain. Good enterprise is stuff people don't want us to know. Good enterprise is making sense of a bunch of stuff a lot of people know and presenting it and boiling it down in a way that helps people understand it. It does not have to be complicated. Good enterprise is something that just simply satisfies a basic curiosity, gets us answers to things people may not want us to have answers to. Other point about this. Good enterprise can be produced by anyone. Reporters, columnists, photographers, videographers, data journalists, data specialists, and yes, even editors. On the bullets. Last point. I'm sorry. Before we get to the bullets, last point. Don't let enterprise be an all or nothing proposition. A lot of people think it is. It's not, and it doesn't have to be. It can be a tool to have investigative reporters. It can be a weapon. It can be a lot of things. But if you find a way to get the enterprise from everyone on the staff, it puts you in a better place. Remember, anywhere, anything, anyone. All right, some basics. Off of the bullets, and I'm sorry I dropped the numbers out and replaced them with bullets, but number one, as I said earlier, everything begins with beat coverage. And any organization where there's more than 2 or 3 people, there are responsibilities on a beat. If you're on a beat, you need to be able to do the basics. You need to make sure you know what's going on your beat. You need to make sure you know who the important people are, and you need to be able to answer questions about that beat. Do that beat long enough, and you will produce enterprise ideas. Number 2, this is, I think, for the people who aren't students or early career journalists in here, the veterans. A lot of what we're talking about is not new, right? If you worked at a small or mid-sized paper 30 years ago, you probably did what we think a good model is today. You wrote daily, and you had something in your pocket. That something in your pocket was your Sunday story, it was your project, it was your whatever. You carried around stories. You would get a phone call back in the day when it was only the paper. We need something for Sunday. What do you have? You had something in your pocket. That something you had in your pocket was enterprise. Number 3, anyone, anywhere, any format. I don't know if any of you know this. At the Star-Ledger, the state's largest newspaper for a bunch of years, the past 5 years, we've won 14 regional New York Emmy Awards for video enterprise work. That newspaper in Newark has won 14 video Emmys. Comes from anywhere, can be on any format. The single best piece of work that came out of our newsroom 3 years ago was an hour-long documentary on youth cheerleading. The past year, we've won all sorts of awards for all sorts of enterprise across all platforms. Anyone, anywhere, and it doesn't have to have limits on it. Number 4, partnerships. We mentioned data. Had a talk with Debbie earlier today about data. Partnering for enterprise, at some point, there's going to be the aha moment and everybody brings it together and it's going to work for everyone. There are people who are doing it very successfully now. There are people who are trying to figure it out. The tools are getting better. The relationships are getting better. It's an opportunity to join forces. Number 5, any department. We got the news this week that one of our reporters was named by the AP sports editors the #1 sports beat writer in the country in the largest class. What do you think that reporter covers, right? You would think it would be Yankees, Giants, something like that. He covers high school sports. And he does great enterprise. And that's why he won that award. Number 6, this is the one that I think a lot of people in positions like mine wrestle with constantly. Is great journalism, can you do great journalism while you pay the bills? What's the price of admission to doing great journalism? Over the past year, I think the big aha moment for me is we've learned that we can deliver the highest level of enterprise out there, still give it a great look in the paper, and still produce audience online, which has been a big change for us because 2-3 years ago, we would drop our big project on Sunday morning. And on Sunday morning, it would get around and the same people who should be reading it were reading it. The change now is we'll move it around. Maybe we'll publish on Thursday for digital. Maybe we'll still put it in the Sunday paper. But there are ways, if you have a strategy that's specific to print and specific to digital, that you can deliver audience and satisfy yourself that you're getting out of this work what you should. And now when we launch a project, it's a surprise to us if the high-level enterprise isn't among our most viewed content every month. And finally on this one, not only you will fail, but you should fail. You have to make mistakes in searching for refining and delivering enterprise. And we're going to get a little bit into that on the next slide. But you better be prepared to fail if you're going to do this. All right, simple roadmap. Number one, this one's all about the why. And this is about honesty, and this is about shaking stories out of people and making sure they know the stories and making sure that they're writing the story that they can write, not the story maybe that they want to write or that they think they have. Rarely do you start a piece of enterprise and it ends up published like the first pitch meeting. Very rare. So start with the whys. Why do I care? Why will our audience care? Why will this make a difference? Why is this something where we should set you free for 3-4 months to do this? If they can't answer the whys, they're not at the place where they're ready to fight for it. Number two, this goes back to failing, and this is something of a poker game for editors. If somebody pitches you an idea and it's going to be significant and it's going to take them out of the mix for a number of weeks or a number of months, the last thing editors want to do is push all the chips to the middle of the table right away. This is the poker game. Do reporting before you go all in. Do reporting before you bring in the photo staff, before you bring in the design staff, before you bring in videographers. Make sure that we have cleared a few hurdles and know that we have something before you scramble all the jets. Number three, this is one of the best pieces of advice that Jim Wilsey, who was the great editor at the Ledger before he retired, left me with. If a reporter can't, in 30 seconds, tell you why a story is important, it's probably not a good idea to let that reporter go for 5 or 6 months to find him or herself, right? And by write a radio commercial, I mean write a real radio commercial. Load it up with the cliches, the whole thing, right? This is groundbreaking, explosive report, and then you get the cliches out when it's time to publish. But if they can't wrap that up in 30 seconds, we're not where we need to be. Number four, write the accessories. The accessories can be anything. It can be the cast of characters, the tale of tape. It can be uploading all the supporting documents. The accessories are where you will find the missing pieces. When you sit down and you work a piece of enterprise and you edit and you organize, if you have the accessories and you know all the players and the timeline of events and everything that's happened, you will be able to see the holes in a story, especially a project. Number five, you would be amazed how many people will commit to a piece of project, a piece of enterprise or a project, and it's like they've launched, a weather balloon, and at some point it's going to come back or it's going to hit the ground somewhere, but there's no back and forth. There's no follow-up. There's no where are we weekly. There's no what do we have. We love to every week, 2 weeks on projects like this, sometimes longer, just have a regular meeting. What do you covet? What do you need? Why aren't we writing the full story yet? What are the things that you still need to do? What do you fear? What's the best case scenario at this point on the project line? And what's the worst case scenario? You know that, you understand it, you're never surprised. Number six, sorry for the language there. I'm sure you're going to hear worse if you go into a newsroom. I said earlier, I think we sometimes have a problem with honesty in our business. And the problem we have often with enterprise at the non-project level is it gets away from us. It gets too long, we wander, and things don't get focused. And as a part of number six, we really like to hammer home a couple of points. Number one, you're going to report and you're going to collect more than you can possibly use. If you haven't done all the reporting. You're going to throw stuff away. And the second big one is, if you want to tell a story, whether it's in traditional format or video or audio or however you're going to do it, you're going to have to leave good stuff out. For any piece of enterprise to be great, you have to leave a lot of good stuff on the floor. And people need to get comfortable with that early in the process. Number 7 and 7A, I think 2 of those Pulitzers in the past 10 or 12 years have not been awarded. Feature writing was a big one the first time they did this. I think that was about 10 years ago. And the reason they didn't do it is because a bunch of stuff was presented as a statement of fact with no attribution, no idea where it came from, no idea if the reporter had witnessed it, if it came from documents, or if it was fairy tale. A lot of good work has been thrown into the pile on the floor at Columbia Journalism School, and I've been a part of the judging process to see it, because there's no attribution and there's no fact-checking, or there's conflicting material in the fact-checking. Finally, look at it from the other side, anticipate the problems, know where things are going to come back at you before you publish. Read the story and critique it from the target of an investigation or from the person who may not like what you're writing. If you understand that, you're way ahead of the game. And let it sit, publish on your timeline. You're in charge of this, it's your control, and it's baked when you say it's baked. Thank you.
Okay, welcome back. So while everybody on this panel is doing quality work, or at least professing to do quality work, it spends all of their time doing quality work, never does anything that is not of quality work. But we know that, and I don't want to get too much into what the next panel is, which is how do we finance it. But it takes time, and time is money. And you talked about the $600 startup fees and everything. So I want to get to that question a little bit. You know, Google has that famous, or did have that famous 20% time. So you know, Kevin, you were talking about people spending 5 to 6 months on a project, and I know that, Tyson, you also spent 6 months on this project, but you're not being given 6 whole months of free time to work completely on this project. Talk a little bit about how the time and the money is allocated in a time where it's more pressured than ever on the return of investment.
So I think a lot of that is trying to have everyone do as many things like this as you can do. If you have a department that is only responsible for enterprise or projects, it doesn't work in the new model. Those positions are very high-priced positions. They're very experienced reporters. And on our staff, we have a lot of senior people who do investigations and the high-level enterprise, but they get pulled in on everything. And they kind of love that, that it keeps them active, it keeps them involved. So the result is that a project that may have taken 4 months 10 years ago will now take 6 months, because there's 2 months of other time baked in where you're going to a reporter and telling her, look, I'm sorry, I know that you really want to get this finished this week, but, you know, Senator Menendez was just indicted. We need you for the next 4 days. And that seems to happen a lot in New Jersey.
Tyson, what about you? How much other stuff were you doing during your project?
I think what Kevin said about having something in your pocket is kind of how the heroin project came about. It was something that the reporter and I felt passionate about trying to work on, and we kind of did it on our own between assignments, and you know, it stopped and started several times. And then we presented it to our editors when we had something to show them. And from there, the video portion got involved, the web people got involved. And while over a 6-month period the story developed, we were still producing daily work and covering our beats and having assignments and I think that, you know, in today's day and age, I don't think I would ever get 6 months to go do something just to work on that. And I think you got to feed the paper the daily. You know, there has to be a photo on the front.
Got to feed the beast. Got to feed the beast. Johanna, you were, you know, talking about how you know, it only cost $600, but you didn't value your time. If you could talk a little bit about that, how much would that cost have gone up to if you'd been able to?
Oh yes, that was that would have been extremely expensive. For example, our second story, which I worked on with another co-founder, we started working on it in September, and we launched LongPlay in January, and that story came out in February. So we were working on that story for 4 months, and that was a big story, and it became a scoop, and it caused a huge political scandal in Finland, and it was talked about in the national press for about 2 months, and it, among other things, it resulted into the Finnish Prime Minister being questioned before a parliamentary committee. That story could not have been done anywhere else but in our startup, because none of the traditional newsrooms would have actually let 2 reporters work on a single story for 4 months. And I think, you know, now it might be a different situation because they've seen that that kind of thing may pay off, but we took a big risk there, and quite a lot of our stories have taken months to produce, sometimes even years, because there might have been a case where the reporter has been kind of on and off following up on a story for several years. Of course, we're all freelancers, so we needed to pay the bills as well as, you know, work on this startup for free. So all of us were working with other smaller stories published elsewhere. A lot of us write books as well, get grants for books. You can live off that for a while. That sort of thing, sort of like, it's a combination of a lot of things, but basically I would argue that that particular story would not have come out anywhere else.
And Phil, do you have people get dispatched for longer times to do enterprise pieces, or is it more that the quality is part of the everyday product?
Yeah, that's a challenge for us because we also have to feed the beast, not the paper beast, but the airtime beast. Right now we have 9 reporters on staff, and almost everyone in the newsroom edits and shoots as well. It's probably extremely difficult right now to get hired in any newsroom without having those skills. I think I got in just in time before I needed to learn, and I've learned now at this point as well. But I would say 90% of the assignments that we give to reporters are given out the night before or the morning of. And so they have that period between, 7 in the morning when they get in their car to go out, set up their interviews, coordinate that back with the desk, conduct their interviews. Many of them are one-man bands, so they're out shooting their own interviews, writing their pieces, sending in their script for approval at 3 o'clock or 3:30, fighting with legal about things that have to be added or taken out of those scripts. That gets wrapped up at 4 o'clock. Then they start covering their piece, edit the piece, get it loaded in. By 5:30, I say wishful thinking, but often they'll get sent in while we're on the air. So there's not a whole lot of time to do enterprise in that schedule. But we take, you have to sometimes you take a shot at it. There was the story I think of was the Hoboken mayor, Dawn Zimmer, that had released her diary of a bunch of incidents she had said happened where she was pressured by the government. We gave one of our correspondents, David Cruz, a month to track down some sources and see what he could find, and he came up with nothing. He came up with that big, you have to fail. David was devastated. We missed him on air for a month, but you have to, sometimes you take a shot at these things and see what you can come up with. But I think that's something that the newspaper side does really well, and we look to you guys as partners to be, to be enterprising those pieces, and then we'd help. Our role would be to be the megaphone to help get it out to more people. And then build off of that.
Thank you. I'm going to look for questions in the audience. Okay, Josh, go ahead.
we've talked on a couple of the panels today about the role of quality journalism in revealing problems or revealing concerning issues, revealing things that people need to know about. But we haven't talked much about the role of journalism that helps people find solutions. So I'm curious about how does the search for solutions also play into how we think about quality too. So that it's not just about revealing the problems, but also helping communities work together to find solutions and what that looks like.
Anybody been thinking about solution-based journalism?
Well, that's not actually what we are doing, but it's something that we often talk about in our meetings because, for instance, I read a piece of research that came out quite recently at one of the Finnish universities about people's media habits, and what really colors them is that people really read the news sort of worry about the world and where it's at is something that really colors the way people consume the news. And they really want solutions, actually, but the media does not really provide those. And I know that there are several enterprises doing explanatory journalism or other kinds of solutions journalism in the US, but that's not something that we see much in Europe yet.
I think that there's probably a fine line between directly contributing to solution, because there's certainly a line between journalism and advocacy. But I think a lot of our work collectively as journalists indirectly comes up with solutions, because it's asking the right questions, it's provoking the right responses from the leaders and the decision makers that starts up conversation and educates people and gets them involved in the process. And I think that's probably the most important groundwork that we could lay by making people in Passaic, or in Monmouth County, aware that their heroin epidemic is not unique, and that they're up in Bergen and Passaic is the same problem, and in Ocean is the same problem, and that is those are the kinds of things that spark conversations with the legislature and different pieces of governing that can come out of it. So I think everything we put out is in a way contributing to a solution. Is that a cheap answer? That's all right.
I was going to jump on that because it made me think what Susan was saying before too about sort of the tradition of the norm of objectivity we've had here in the U.S. and this the sort of professional disassociation between journalism and advocacy. And I wonder if that can explain sort of the shortfall we see as far as because once you start going into that realm of solutions, then that is a very different mission statement than I think how journalism has traditionally been defined here. And I guess to just a big question of a potential major redefinition of what journalistic mission statements could or should be.
I don't know that it has to be. I mean, if you look at the Solutions Journalism Network, the Solutions Journalism Network is, it's like New York Times reporters and others who have come together to look at how we can report on solutions without advocating for them. But how we can say, it's not just about the problems, but there are all these solutions out there. Here's how other communities have dealt with this. And just revealing the solutions as well as revealing the problems doesn't necessarily say that we are advocating for those solutions.
Right, but I think that's
a really interesting work in there, thinking about how we think about that as part of quality too.
Right. Yeah.
Sure, but on that, so if you're sitting and interviewing President Assad, there's a difference between trying to convince him not to use chemical weapons on his own people than there is about asking the questions, finding out facts, and having the world stage take notice of it, and that's where there's a line, and that's hard as people, because we all have our own opinions. We're all feeling the same pain that we're covering, so it's hard to take yourself away from it. But I grew up in a house. My father is a journalist as well, and growing up, I would say, "Dad, who are you voting for?" And he would say, "None of your business. I'm a journalist," and he would never tell me, and I never understood. I was like, "Just tell me. It's not a big deal," because he was from that old school of, my opinion doesn't matter. It's not about what I think, and the business is going in a different way now.
Well, I think one of the problems gets back to definitions again. I don't equate journalism with news reporting. I think journalism includes opinion and advocacy, and of course that's why you have editorial pages. They developed as basically solutions of the newspaper to the community. And when you had multiple newspapers, you had multiple solutions. And so I think journalism, when it includes the opinion and the advocacy side, certainly offers, but you have to be very careful. I agree if you start putting solutions into your news reporting unless they are representing sources and you're being somewhat balanced in that.
Maybe one more question here? Yeah. Oh, in the back. You're on.
All right, we got a minute.
I'm an international student, and I'm now attending the 2+2 program in the journalism and media study. And so I have a question to Mr. Phil Alongi. So you just mentioned the citizen journalist at the end of your speech. So I'm really interested in it because, nowadays an individual could get news gathering and broadcast the news by themselves via the social media. Like they can upload the videos into the YouTube. They can send a Twitter to broadcast the news. So, and there are some notable examples of the citizen journalists, like the Arab Spring and the protests in Turkey and like that. So some of my friends may ask me, now that everyone can be their own individual journalist now, why you still choose a major like to learn the specific knowledge of the journalism? And I also want to know you, how do you think about the citizen journalists may affect the role or the function of the professional journalism? How do you think about it?
I think it's just adding extra tools into our kits, and it's kind of up to, if at the editor level, it's up to us to kind of decipher again what's a source and what's actual news coming out of something. You can't take anything as gospel from hearing it from one source. I think that citizen journalism is something that's changing our industry because it's giving, look at this shooting down in South Carolina. You could call that a form of citizen journalism, where that outcome may have been very different. Obviously, if there was no video of this man getting shot by a police officer, but that is not that video is not enough to tell the whole story. There still needs to be a case. Investigators don't look at the phone and say, "Okay, thanks a lot," and then go ahead and act. And that's kind of the same role that we have, I think, as journalists. It's embrace it, but don't rely on it, because a citizen journalist who calls himself a citizen journalist, that's not enough for me to say I have a camera, I have the tool, and I call myself a citizen journalist. Would you go to a dentist that called him, it was a citizen dentist, and said, I have pliers, let me take your molar out? They may be a very good dentist, a very good citizen dentist, but there's a difference between the two, and you need to make sure that your standards are the same as their standards.
You might see them more as a source, right? Like the way you would vet a source.
Although with the cost of healthcare, maybe citizens.
I think we are done. Off to the coffee. Thank you.